Anthony, Dan, and Antoinette, thank you for joining us. It's said that our nation changed on September 11th, 2001, when attacks brought down the World Trade Center towers and killed thousands of people and eventually thrust our nation into not one, but two wars. I know it directly impacted all three of you and kind of changed your future as far as what you were going to do with your lives. So let's start a little bit with your stories. Antoinette, how did 9/11 impact your decision to join the military?
So on 9/11, I was actually a senior in high school. I grew up in Staten Island, New York, which is a part of New York City. So I was driving to school that morning and I saw one of the towers on fire, and I was confused. How did they not see this tower? How did they fly into it? Maybe it was a rookie pilot or something. At first it didn't set off any alarms in my head. But then I remember as the day progressed and we were in class that there was an announcement over the loudspeaker saying that the second plane had hit the World Trade Center and that they were both on fire at this time. I was completely shocked. There was, panic and chaos in my high school. They wanted us to stay in class to be safe, but, everyone, knew someone that was there or had a parent that worked there. We actually had a co-op program where there were students from my high school that were actually working in World Trade Center. Had it not been the beginning of the school year, they might have been there. We might have lost people from my high school graduating class. That's why I never thought about joining the military until that day. Watching the towers fall with my lifelong friends that I grew up with on Staten Island was a harrowing experience, and it changed us forever. I didn't know. I felt helpless, but what could I possibly do to do something to make this right this wrong? So I spoke to my parents about joining the military. At first they weren't thrilled about it. Their expectation was, you're going to go to college, you're going to, do this, do that, like basically you fall in line with what people, what high school students usually do. That's like the normal pathway, but I had to do something. I couldn't just go to school and be okay with what happened to our city. So I ended up joining the military, getting my parents to sign my life away because I was only 17, wasn't able to sign up myself. And then I never forgot that day. I still look at New York City on a regular basis, and it's not the same. It will never be the same. So that was basically what impacted my decision to join the military, was 9/11 and losing a lot of loved ones and losing something that represented our city, which was the Twin Towers.
Anthony, how did 9/11 impact you?
9/11 impacted my life with a lot of decisions that I had to make on what I was going to do getting out of high school. I just started high school, was in geography class, when all of a sudden on the TV, there's this special news report coming from our local news station. And then they just started going on what was happening in New York. I had no idea what was going on. I was still a young, naive kid, so I thought maybe, like Antoinette said, that somebody had no idea what they were doing and accidentally hit into the tower. And sitting there just waiting to see what was happening, and out of nowhere, here comes plane number 2 crashing into the second tower. And then that's when it kind of clicked for me that, something big is going on here. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know who was doing it. I didn't know the reason for it. I just knew something bad was happening. And at that time, I didn't know what the word terrorism really was until they first used it in the newscast. And I thought maybe, people were going to come over and start a war with us. I thought that was the reason they were doing it, was to come to invade us. But really, it was just a small act to get for a bigger picture on the terrorism side. And hearing stories from my grandparents and aunts and uncles who served prior to all of the events of 9/11 happening, how they got to go overseas, some were in wars, some were during peacetime. I just knew that it was my calling this is why it happened, is for me to make a decision on what I wanted to do. And also just seeing all those people helpless in the towers, not being able to defend themselves from acts of terrorism, from the cowardice that was terrorists that did that to the towers and those people. I knew I could help defend them with my life and just how I was. So like Antoinette said, I asked my parents. They were hesitant. They didn't know if they should say yes or no. Took me to the recruiting office and asked me if that's what I really wanted to do. And I didn't have any other choice. That's what I wanted to do. I had my mindset on joining the military. And so they allowed me to join. And 3 years later, 2004, I went to boot camp and started my military career with the United States Marine Corps.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Antoinette. Now, Dan, your story's a little different because you had joined the Army and served 3 years and had gotten out. You were back in the civilian world on 2001. Talk to me about 9/11, how it impacted you.
So I was living a cushy little civilian life and was starting my day like any other normal day, and had the news on and saw what happened, the attack on our country. At first I was shocked. I was really in shock, and but then I was angry, and then I was then my sense of call to duty and service kind of kicked in. So like you had said, I was in the military previously in the United States Army. And so after that event, I'm a very patriotic guy. I wanted to help my country and to do anything I could. So I was kind of thinking, what can I do to get back to my country and help us recover from this? And so I was in the military, and I thought, well, let me go to the recruiter and see if I can join the National Guard. And so sure enough, I was prior service, so it was a pretty easy thing to do. So I went down to the recruiter, signed up, went for the physical, and in February 2002, I was in the National Guard. At that time, I just figured I'd be doing something in our domestically, homeland, guard in the airport. But as things unfolded in Afghanistan and then eventually Iraq, I was activated somewhere around September 2002. And the next thing I know, I was in Iraq in March of 2003, thrust into some heavy duty combat. But I did it willingly and very patriotically and with really committed, because I knew what happened that day, and this is the way we needed to rectify the situation, and hopefully that it would never happen again, because a lot of innocent people, a lot of lives were changed, changed the directory of our country for a long time. So was in Iraq for a year, went through some pretty horrific stuff, and but made it back alive. Not everybody that I went there with did that. So coming back to civilian life really was a transition for me. So yeah, but really I wouldn't change a thing in the world. The guys I served with that didn't come back would say the same thing. They really were dedicated to the mission and our country.
Now, Dan, so you joined the National Guard, and was your intention to serve a long time in the National Guard, or was this just let me just join in, do a 4 or 6 year kind of tour of duty and then go from there? Because you still had your civilian life.
Right. Correct. I had no intention of going the long haul, but I left the door open to that. I didn't realize I was going to get injured during my deployment. So that made the decision for me. So, but I probably would have continued to serve just because I found great reward from it. And it was really, it's a real good thing to do for your country. So I really embraced the military culture. I think it helps a lot. And so it does nothing but good for me in my life. And so I really have nothing but high regards for it.
Thank you for your service. Antoinette, you also joined the Guard. So what was your kind of plan when you signed up? Was it just, it was that reaction, you wanted to do something, or was this something that you thought would stay with you for a long time?
So to be honest, I don't think I really realized the magnitude of my decision until I was actually in Iraq. So, you know, you think National Guard, national, that means you're going to stay in America. But, you know, a year after I graduated basic training, I got orders to go to Iraq, and it was like, whoa, like, what did I didn't realize it would be to this. I didn't think I would end up in the Middle East. So again, like, the military never was something that I was going to pursue previous to 9/11. So I did 8.5 years. I would have done more, but just like Dan, like, I got, injured, unfortunately. So that also made the decision for me that it was time to, throw in the towel. I would have gone longer if I could have. I always think about it, I would be almost at 20 years at this point. 9/11 was that long ago that it was, I would have been 20 years in, and, even though it was so long ago, it still feels very deeply personal to me, what happened that day. So I do miss the military, but, I serve my community in other ways now that I'm a civilian.
Thank you for your service. Anthony, so you joined the Marine Corps. So what was your plan as far as, was this a career decision?
After being in the Marine Corps for a year, I did my first deployment almost right out of boot camp. Got out of boot camp, went to the School of Infantry in Camp Pendleton, California. Did 3 months there, well, like 2 months, 2.5 months. And right out of SOI, is what we call it, the School of Infantry, I was placed in my duty station. And maybe 3 months at my duty station, I was getting deployed. So I didn't really get a chance to relax, should I say. I was from one training regiment to another. Once I got to my duty station, we were in the field for almost 2 months. Didn't even get a chance to unpack my bag from SOI to get settled in, because we were getting ready to ship out in a couple months. After that first year, I knew I wanted to stay in. There was nothing else for me. It got me hooked. I just love the camaraderie, how we acted together when we were together. A lot of the guys that I served with, we did 3 deployments together. So I don't know how much closer you can get when you're in the suck together, complaining about, how bad the food is when it's all prepackaged. And so you learn every little detail about the guys you're serving with, especially being so close to their families, everything about their families and their background. So you kind of have that camaraderie of knowing, almost going through the same thing, not even being in the military, just how you grew up, grew up the same way and didn't even know it. So that made me want to stay in, do my full 20. And obviously on my third deployment, I was injured, so that kind of cut it short. I could have stayed in and did a desk job, but that just wasn't me. That wasn't my style. I was used to being out in the field, running and gunning, and do what I can to learn more about my job, and not just mine, but others. So I was devastated when I got injured, but I knew that if I wasn't going to be able to do my job that I was there to do, then I didn't want to do anything else.
And talk to me. So you were on your third deployment when you got injured, but it took you a while to realize you were injured, right?
Woke up 3 months later from a drug-induced coma because of the fact of my injuries. They had to put me under. So waking up, looking in the mirror for the first time ever in 3 months after my injuries, my mind just started racing 100 miles an hour, trying to figure out what am I going to do now? Where am I going to go? How am I going to support not just myself, but my family with my injuries. I'm not going to be able to work, especially with the job that I had in the Marine Corps, always doing something. Everything that you did was physical. So, looking at myself, trying to figure out, man, what am I going to do now? I have no idea how I'm going to support me or my wife or my future kids. And, where are we going to live now? What are we going to do? And, stuff that I shouldn't have really been worried about at the time, but for some reason it was just racing through my brain. What am I going to do as a man to fix this? And just talking to a lot of other wounded veterans, and especially having Wounded Warrior Project come in with those famous backpacks that they give us while we're in the hospital. That was my first encounter with Wounded Warrior Project. And the guy that actually came in was also a burn victim from Iraq. And he basically got injured the same way. I wish I could remember his name, but I was still out of it with all the narcotics that were being pumped into me. But just being able to take off that gown, that hospital gown, and put some shorts and a t-shirt on and some socks, it changed the way I stayed in the hospital almost 360. It was just, I just felt normal at that point and was ready and willing to do all my therapy and go to my appointments. But before that, when I just had that gown on, I really didn't want to do anything. And being able to receive all that stuff in the backpack, it gave me that boost I needed to get out of bed and get my life going again.
Awesome. Now tell me, Anthony, about that transition. So you were worried about kind of what was next because you were planning to be a lifer with the Marine Corps, and injury kind of stopped that really short where there was no plan in the civilian world for you. So what was that? What were some of the challenges you faced trying to transition from a Marine career to a civilian life?
Well, when I was transitioning from the Marine Corps life to civilian life, I told myself that if I did happen to get out early, I was going to get a job doing security, cop, sheriff, whatever. I was going to do that. But then obviously with my injuries, I didn't feel as though I could protect anybody but myself from anybody that was willing to hurt me. I just knew that I would be able to put up some sort of fight to keep it. And I didn't want to really put anybody else's life in my hands with my disability. So I really didn't have any other jobs lined up as far as like plan B. So I had no idea. I was just transitioning, trying to get ahead of everything, making sure we had a place to live, where to go, where we were going to live, if we were going to stay where I was at in San Antonio or move back to my hometown, and just figure out what I was going to do. It was kind of rough there for a little while because I did not want to leave the house. I wanted to stay inside and have the shades closed where no one saw me. I really didn't like some of the way people were looking at me. But then again, people really don't see these type of injuries back then. The war was still, still fresh, especially in Afghanistan. And, a lot of guys with my injuries usually didn't make it. So to see someone walking around with my injuries, it was kind of weird for people. But then again, as I went through some meet and greets with Wounded Warrior Project, I came out of my shell a little bit. It helped the transition a little bit easier because some of these guys that I talked to that had the same injuries as me were doing, whatever they want. They were going back to school or starting, other jobs that didn't require them to do much physical work. And get to know those guys to what they do helped me transition and figure out step by step what I wanted to do. And just having them there and Wounded Warrior Project to guide me as far as getting back to civilian life is what I needed. really did help me and my wife, and it just got me out of my shell to keep moving forward and not just be inside all the time.
Antoinette, let's talk about your transition to civilian life. So you were National Guard, so you were already living a civilian life before you got deployed. So how was that coming back to try and get back into that civilian life?
So when I got back from Iraq, I actually wasn't even 21 yet. Couldn't go out with my friends to drink and have a good time. But at the same time, was in no mood to do that anyway. Like I was having a very hard transition back to being the person that I was before I left for Iraq. You know, I was also very social. Like I had a lot of friends growing up. So when I just wanted to stay by myself and isolate and just not be bothered by anybody, like I knew something was wrong. But I basically framed it as I'm just really tired. I just need a little time to rest. You know, I just want to be in my room with the shades pulled down and, you know, catch up on sleep that I was missing from being overseas. I did that for about a month straight. You know, my parents didn't think anything really of it at the time because I think I sold it to them very well that everything was fine. I ended up going back to school full time, going back to work full time, basically just being as busy as I possibly could so that I didn't have to think about my experiences in Iraq and my regrets and, you know, replaying the tape as to why, you know, I could have done this, like, why is this person gone? You know, why am I here? So that was a very dark time in my life. But at the same time, like, I kind of benefited a little bit from that experience, you know, because I was able to excel in my professional life. However, my personal life was basically non-existent. I didn't really have much going on. So it wasn't until several years later that I basically had to admit that I had an issue, you know, that I asked my parents for help. You know, I'm very blessed to have two loving, supportive, you know, ride or die parents that, you know, I ended up crawling into bed with them one evening when I got home from work after a 14-hour shift in the pharmacy. And, you know, I was just crying and saying, you know, Mom, Dad, like, I really need help. Like, please help me. And, you know, they hit the ground running and they got me into an inpatient program at the VA where I stayed for 5 months. And everything started to just process. I processed the trauma and I met people, well, other veterans that also had, you know, the invisible wounds of war that civilians usually don't understand. So that's where I learned about Wounded Warrior Project. And I didn't think I qualified at first since I was, you know, I was all in one piece. Like I was very blessed to come back without any, you know, extravagant physical injuries from war. But mentally I was just broken, completely broken. And, you know, I remember my first Wounded Warrior Project event, we went kayaking and I was very, very nervous about going. You know, I was going by myself to meet people I've never met, to be with an organization that I've only heard of and seen commercials about. But I went and it was like everything just sunk in almost immediately that like I was where I was supposed to be. I was with a bunch of other veterans from my area, New York City. We were kayaking on the Hudson River, which if you've been to New York, that's right between New Jersey and New York City. So we had a great view. And, you know, I was able to just laugh and feel alive again and, you know, form friendships with people from my area that also had deployed and also were dealing with really heavy issues. A lot of them I'm still really good friends with today. I haven't seen them in a while, unfortunately, because of COVID, but we do keep in touch. But that transition from from military life to civilian life, it was pretty difficult. And I did a good job at avoiding facing the music for a while, but you can only do that for so long. And it was exhausting. I was tired. I don't even know how I got through it, to be honest. But but I'm here today now. And, you know, I'm back to loving life and living life, not just being alive, but living. And, you know, I do attribute a lot of that success to the Warrior Project. You know, I know that I have like an ally in my corner when I'm not too pleased with myself, or if I start to fall back into those old habits, those thoughts that, you know, why am I here? Why am I alive? I know I have like I said, like an ally that understands me and loves me for who I am and understands my journey and my struggle and appreciates how far I've come. So I'm very blessed to have, you know, gone inpatient, met another veteran that told me about Wounded Warrior Project and taking the plunge of actually, you know, stepping out of the comfort zone and trying something new out that I hadn't did that in years at that point.
Well, we're glad you came out, you know, and hopefully others will see this and say, I can do that too, because, you know, the big key is connecting with other veterans and realizing that the challenges you face, you're not alone at. There's other veterans out there who are facing the same challenges. They may be further along in their process and have suggestions for you, or just someone to kind of hear your challenges. So Dan, you're out in California, so we'll come to you next. How was that transition, returning back to the States, getting back into civilian life? How was that for you?
Well, at first it wasn't turbulent. I was pretty gung-ho when I got back from being in Iraq. I was pretty proud of what happened. You know, I was really, you know, went there, we did what we needed to do. I felt grateful that I made it back alive. But so when we came back, you know, I'm in Fort Lewis in Washington on an Army base, and then, you know, I'm still out processing and from the active Army back into my National Guard unit. So I'm starting to go back home. I haven't completely out processed yet because I still had medical stuff that was being addressed. And but once I was completely out, there was that total disconnect from being in a military family, being on a military post, the camaraderie and all the, you know, you form these friendships with other people that are very close to you, and you've gone through things that show you what the best of humanity and the worst of humanity. And you've shared experiences that you'll never share with another human again. So those are close bonds. And even if you didn't serve with somebody directly, but they deployed, you kind of had that common bond. So it was like you know, just a unwritten thing and a comfort level. So when you're disconnected from that, and it's like a family for you, like the first 3 months I was in civilian life, I felt good because everybody was like, yeah, you did a great job over there. Everyone knew I served, and, you know, buying your beers, and I felt proud of what I did over there. And I was on an emotional high. Even when I was activated though, because I was a combat medic and we were doing a lot of combat operations, I was having, even when I was in active duty, I was having flashbacks. But you're in the military, you just kind of compartmentalize that stuff and just keep driving on, and you don't think about it. And it wasn't really until about 3 months after I came off that emotional high of like, yeah, I did something good for my country, I feel great, that wore off. And once that wore off, I was beside myself, and then everything started coming into my head about what happened. And the guys that medevaced out and I saw leave with severe injuries, being medevaced out and going to long stool and then stateside, and then not knowing what happened to them, and just the events like that, guys that I saw that didn't make it back alive. Those images started coming into my head, and I was an older veteran at the time, and I thought I had good coping skills, but nothing prepares you for that. And so then my coping skill became alcohol. I started self-medicating. I had, I was a medic, so I had a lot of prescriptions for sleeping. And so I just started using alcohol. and sleeping medications to numb the pain and just to not think about things. And then, of course, like a lot of us do, we just isolate and go in a closed room and don't want to engage with anybody. And so it was tough. And then luckily, like Antoinette and Anthony there, I have a good, supportive, loving family. And they were trying to help me as best they can. But eventually I knew that something was wrong and I couldn't continue to live my life this way. And so really I had a moment where it's kind of a spiritual thing where I saw some of the guys that it was like a dream or something. And the guys I served with that didn't make it back saying, "Hey, Smee, this isn't you. We don't want you to live your life like this. This isn't you. Live in the memory of us," right? So that's when I knew, yeah, this isn't me. And so I went to the VA, and in the time I saw a Wounded Warrior Project commercial that had one of my best friends that I did see get medevaced out of country, and Dan Nevins, and he was a double amputee. And so I saw the commercial, and when I was in Iraq, I saw guys coming back, like Anthony, they had the backpacks. I saw guys coming back from from Germany that got injured, but then they came back in the country after recovering their injuries, and they had the Wounded Warrior backpack. And I always remember the logo, but I never really gave it much thought. And then I saw my friend Dan Nevins on a TV commercial, and the two kind of clicked, and I went, yeah, if he's involved with that, because he was a great guy to serve with, I knew that's an organization that I need to be involved with. And it really came full circle. Once I started, in my recovery process, I remember going back out to New York. I think it was in May 2010. Wounded Warrior Project set up an event where we got to go to what was left of the Twin Tower site. And we went into one of the buildings that was still kind of standing and you could overlook. And we went, there was the first responders, firemen, the police officers, they were all there. Some of them had been there that day and telling us, and it just completed the whole circle of why I actually went to Iraq in the first place anyway. And, it kind of made me feel better, like, okay, I went to Iraq and I experienced all that, but this is why I'm in a building that's hollowed out still, several years later, looking down into a hole in the ground of after what happened in 9/11. And it was just really like kind of comforting and reassuring to me that that was this was why I did what I did. And then being engaged with the other warriors that day just gave me a comfort level that I hadn't felt in a long time. And it was really, I can't say enough for Wounded Warrior Project. I just really made the biggest difference in my life. For me to be re-engaged with veterans that are experiencing all injuries and all different things is just really, it's just really impactful for me. And hopefully, more veterans who are out there struggling can go out there and get the help too, and be engaged as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing.